Please like, share and subscribe. Title: Forsaken Echoes. Sarah stood on the edge of the forest, her heart pounding in her chest like a trapped bird, desperately seeking escape. The dense canopy above cast dappled shadows on the forest floor, concealing the path ahead in a veil of uncertainty. With each rustle of the leaves and whisper of the wind, her resolve wavered, but she knew she had no choice. She had to go through with it. Flashbacks of whispered conversations and disapproving glances from her parents flooded Sarah's mind, their judgmental voices echoing in her ears like a relentless chorus of condemnation. She had always been the dutiful daughter who followed the rules and obeyed without question. But when she found herself pregnant, the weight of her parents' expectations became suffocating, crushing her beneath their oppressive gaze. Sarah had kept her pregnancy a secret, hiding her growing belly beneath oversized sweaters and avoiding family gatherings like the plague. She couldn't bear the thought of facing their disappointment, their shame. And so, she decided to flee, to seek solace in the solitude of the forest and escape the clutches of her suffocating reality. As she ventured deeper into the woods, the air grew thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, mingling with the tang of her own fear. Every step felt like a betrayal, a silent acknowledgement of the life growing inside her that she was about to forsake. But she couldn't bring herself to turn back or face the consequences of her actions. Finally, she reached a secluded clearing bathed in the peaceful glow of moonlight filtering through the trees. With trembling hands, Sarah sank to her knees, the weight of her unborn child heavy on her soul. Tears gushed down her cheeks as she whispered a silent apology to the tiny life she carried, knowing that she could never undo the irreversible choice she was about to make. With a final, agonized sob, Sarah laid her newborn baby on the forest floor, wrapping it in a threadbare blanket she had brought from home. She kissed its tiny forehead, a bittersweet farewell to the child she could never keep. And then, with a heart heavy with guilt and regret, she turned and fled into the night, leaving her baby behind in the shadows of the forest, condemned to a fate she could never escape. Days turned into nights, and Sarah's guilt festered like a wound that refused to heal. Each morning brought with it a heavy sense of remorse, a relentless reminder of the life she had abandoned in the forest. She tried to bury her anguish beneath a facade of normalcy, but the memory of her sin gnawed at her from within, threatening to consume her soul. As the weeks passed, Sarah found herself drawn back to the forest, haunted by the spectre of her abandoned child. The weight of her secret hung heavy around her neck, dragging her deeper into the depths of despair with each passing day. She tried to convince herself that she was seeking closure, a chance to say a final goodbye to the child she had forsaken, but deep down, she knew the truth. She was running from her guilt, from the consequences of her actions. On one particularly restless night, Sarah wandered aimlessly through the darkened woods, the moonlight casting long shadows dancing at the sides of her vision. The forest seemed to pulse with otherworldly energy, its ancient trees whispering secrets of forgotten sins and lost souls. Suddenly, she heard a faint, haunting cry echoing through the trees like a mournful lament. Sarah froze, her heart pounding in her chest as the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. It couldn't be, she thought, her mind recoiling from the possibility of what she might find. But the cries persisted, growing louder and more desperate with each passing moment. Unable to resist the pull, Sarah followed the sound, her footsteps quickening as she raced through the underbrush, her pulse pounding in her ears like a drumbeat of dread. And then, she saw it, a flickering figure bathed in moonlight, its form ethereal and insubstantial. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she beheld the ghostly apparition of her abandoned child, its eyes filled with a longing that pierced her soul like a dagger. At that moment, Sarah realized that her sins could not be outrun, and her guilt could not be silenced. The spectre of her abandoned child was a manifestation of her own remorse, a relentless reminder of the love she had denied and the life she had forsaken. As the ghostly cries echoed through the forest, Sarah knew she could never escape the haunting echoes of her guilt. Night after night, Sarah found herself drawn back to the forest, unable to resist the spectral cries of her abandoned child. Each time she ventured into the darkness, the ghostly presence seemed to grow stronger, its mournful wails echoing through the trees with an intensity that pierced Sarah's heart like a dagger. Haunted by guilt and consumed by remorse, Sarah's grip on reality began to slip. Sleep became a distant memory as she wandered the forest in a daze, her mind tormented by visions of her forsaken child. Her once bright eyes grew hollow with exhaustion, their depths filled with the shadow of her guilt. The townsfolk whispered tales of the haunted forest, warning of the vengeful spirit that roamed its depths in search of its lost mother. But Sarah paid them no heed, consumed by her own anguish and unable to escape the haunting echoes of her past. One fateful night, as Sarah ventured deeper into the heart of the forest, she stumbled upon a clearing bathed in moonlight. There, amidst the shifting shadows and whispering trees, she beheld the spectral figure of her abandoned child, its form shimmering with an ethereal light. Tears streamed down Sarah's cheeks as she approached the ghostly apparition, her heart heavy with regret and longing. She reached out a trembling hand, her fingers brushing against the child's translucent form, and in that moment, she felt a surge of unimaginable sorrow wash over her. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I'm so sorry, my sweet child." Sarah leaves and returns to town. Back in town, the whispers of the haunted forest grew louder, fueled by rumors of a miraculous encounter between a grieving mother and her lost child. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah was shattered by the relentless presence of her spectral child. Despite her efforts to move forward, the ghostly apparition remained tethered to her, its ethereal form a constant reminder of the sins of her past. One fateful night, as Sarah lay in bed, the ghostly presence materialized before her, its eyes burning with a mixture of sorrow and anger. "Why, Mother?" it whispered, its voice echoing through the room like a chilling breeze. "Why did you abandon me?" Sarah recoiled at the sound of her child's voice, her heart heavy with guilt and regret. "I was scared," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I didn't know what else to do." The ghostly figure regarded her with a gaze filled with accusation and longing. "You left me alone, Mother," it murmured, its voice tinged with sorrow. "Alone in the darkness, with no one to love, hold, and cherish me." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she reached out to her spectral child, her fingers trembling with remorse. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I never meant to hurt you." But the ghostly figure remained unmoved, its translucent form pulsing with an otherworldly energy. "Sorry isn't enough, Mother," it hissed, its voice filled with bitterness and resentment. "You took everything from me, my life, my love, my future. And now, I will take everything from you." With those haunting words, the ghostly figure lunged at Sarah, its ethereal form enveloping her in a suffocating embrace. Sarah gasped as she felt the icy tendrils of the ghostly presence seep into her very soul, binding her to its will with a malevolent force. From that moment on, Sarah's life became a living nightmare, haunted by the relentless torment of her spectral child. The ghostly apparition followed her everywhere, its presence a constant reminder of her past sins and the price she must pay for her betrayal. Try as she might to escape, Sarah found herself trapped in a never-ending cycle of guilt and despair, her every waking moment plagued by the haunting echoes of her own remorse. And as the ghostly figure tightened its grip on her soul, Sarah realized with a sinking heart that her spectral child had no intention of granting her peace, not now, not ever. Days turned into nights, and Sarah's life descended into a harrowing ordeal of torment and anguish. The relentless presence of her spectral child loomed over her like a dark cloud, its haunting cries echoing through the halls of her mind with a chilling intensity. No matter where she turned, she found herself trapped in the suffocating grip of her own guilt and remorse. Sleep became a distant memory, replaced by restless nights haunted by the ghostly apparition of her abandoned child. Its ethereal form would materialize at the foot of her bed, its eyes burning with a mixture of accusation and longing as it whispered tales of loneliness and despair. "You left me to rot in the darkness, Mother," it would hiss, its voice echoing through the empty room like a haunting refrain. "Now, you will endure as I have endured." Sarah's days became a blur of fear and paranoia, her every moment overshadowed by the relentless presence of her spectral child. She would catch glimpses of its translucent form in the corner of her eye, lurking in the shadows, its ghostly visage a constant reminder of her past sins. No matter how hard she tried to escape, the ghostly apparition seemed to be everywhere, its icy tendrils tightening around her soul with each passing day. Desperate for relief, Sarah sought solace in the rituals of her past. She prayed for forgiveness, begged for redemption, and pleaded for release from the torment that plagued her every waking moment. But her prayers fell on deaf ears, unanswered by the silent void surrounding her. And as the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, Sarah's spirit began to wither under the weight of her own guilt and despair. She became a mere remains of her former self, her once bright eyes dulled by the shadow of her own remorse. But even in the depths of her despair, Sarah clung to a glimmer of hope, a hope that one day, she would find a way to atone for her sins, break free from the suffocating grip of her spectral child, and find redemption in the eyes of her abandoned child. And as she closed her eyes and whispered a silent prayer into the darkness, she vowed never to give up hope, no matter how bleak the future may seem. As the relentless torment of her spectral child drove Sarah to the brink of madness, the people of the town turned against her, their whispers of fear and suspicion morphing into accusations of witchcraft and devilry. They blamed her for the darkness that had descended upon their once peaceful community, branding her as a pariah and a bringer of doom. Mocked and scorned by those she had once called neighbors, Sarah found herself cast out from the town she had once called home. With nowhere left to turn, she retreated to the secluded forest where she had decided to abandon her child, seeking solace in the solitude of her own despair. Alone and broken, Sarah's mind became a twisted labyrinth of madness and despair. Haunted by the relentless presence of her spectral child and tormented by the memories of her past sins, she saw no way out, no escape from the suffocating darkness that consumed her every waking moment. In a final act of desperation, Sarah resolved to end her own suffering once and for all. Returning to the very spot where she had committed the ultimate betrayal, she fashioned a makeshift noose from the branches of a nearby tree, and embraced the cold embrace of death. As the life drained from her body and her vision faded to black, Sarah felt a sense of release wash over her, a fleeting moment of peace in a lifetime consumed by pain and regret. But as her spirit slipped into the darkness, she realized with a sinking heart that her torment was far from over. Trapped in the dark realm, between life and death, Sarah found herself alone once more, her spectral child nowhere to be found. And as she drifted through the endless void, she knew that she would spend eternity paying the price for her sins, condemned to wander the shadows alone, with no hope of redemption or escape.